So first of all, thank you for bumming us out about the state of humanity.
I see too many smiling faces. You
There was a lot.
have gotten
I was
the
in the
movie.
audience. There was a lot of laughter going on through the film. It surprised me. Some uncomfortable laughter, but some laughter too. What attracted you to this project? I mean, Michael, you said you read the script first 8 years ago or something, correct?
Yeah, I think there have been, dozens of iterations of the script, dating back to 1971, probably.
But what part could you have been playing 8 years ago?
I wasn't right for any of the
Okay,
parts.
good, 'cause you were, what,
So
12?
I'm really happy it didn't get made.
Okay.
So I was aware of it, 8 years ago when I was 17, 18, and I had read it for the first time. And to me, it was just a great opportunity to get a group of young actors together and portray real characters in a situation that really occurred.
So how much were you aware of the actual story, and how much research did you do going into the film in terms of watching the real footage? And
The original transcript of the original script was pretty much a transcript of the actual experiment, and I think it was over 300 pages long. And so, Tim Talbot, the writer, got it down to like 130 pages, and it was all the research you really needed. But then Dr. Zimbardo has this great book, The Lucifer Effect, which has been around for a long time, which we were able to read. And you just type in on Google Stanford Prison Experiment, and you get to watch the documentary. You get to watch the interviews that we pretty much recreated, beat by beat at the end of the movie. And so, as far as preparation goes, there was like a wellspring of material that you could really, bite into.
And did you meet the real Dr. Zimbardo?
Oh yeah. He's a fascinating personality, and he's still, his sense of self is really still deeply tied to this experiment. So it was important for him to be a part of it and to have a point of view. And the interesting thing from my perspective was he wanted to have a three-dimensional point of view about how he behaved at the time. And one of the things that he didn't anticipate in doing this experiment was how he would get involved and lose his own sense of moral authority. And he was perfectly willing to admit that and describe that experience of when finally his girlfriend said, "You're not doing the experiment anymore, you're part of the experiment." That event actually happened. It was a fight between them. And so on the one hand, it was kind of thrilling to meet him. But, my perspective as an actor is that I really only have the screenplay to play with. I don't want to embellish too much on the side, especially with a screenplay like this that's so taut. And it's not a character study of Zimbardo. It's essentially just trying to describe what happened. And that in itself is extremely dramatic. So you don't want to interfere too much. And Dr. Zimbardo is an incredibly eccentric character that one could, have a field day as an actor with trying to go online and watch him, And he would say that himself. He used to wear a cape to class. He was interested in in the creation of his own personality. So there are many things that, as an actor, you go, yeah, I can bite into this. But the movie was not interested in that in the same way, and I think for good reason. It's an incredibly provocative study of human behavior, and it's also a study of academia and how we go about trying to understand human behavior, and I found that compelling enough.
And Michael, is your character based on someone specific, or
Yeah,
were you able to meet the person?
They made a pretty specific choice. Kyle did anyway, and Tim Talbot, the writer, in which they, the only name that is given to the film that was actually a part of the experiment, or the only two names, are Phil, Dr. Zimbardo, and Christina Zimbardo, his now wife. And all of the other guys, I feel like they, in all fairness, wanted to protect slightly, because I think you know, a lot of people who don't really know the intricacies of the experiment would immediately label these young guys who were, you know, 19-year-old college students who lived in California as bad guys, which it's just really not fair to them, because they were, you know, just as innocent as the guys who played the prisoners. And so they really, at the end of the day, kind of...
This is coming from the guy who played the lead sadist. So, but you know, that being said, also just to add to that, the guards who did nothing were as complicit, and that's a really interesting facet of this movie as well. Yeah. The prisoners who did nothing to assuage the panic of their fellow prisoners were complicit as well. Mm-hmm. It's just what ended up happening is the role-playing, the societal role-playing that goes on with everybody and socialization took over. And right. This is a fundamental part of who we are. You behave differently at a Mets game than you do at church. Are you two different people? Probably not. Probably the same person, but there are different social consequences to all of your... So this happens in extreme environments as well. Yeah.
Yeah, I mean, the basic question is the one that they pose at the end of the movie, is in which the character who my guy was, or the person who my character was based on, was this guy named Dave Eshelman, who in real life is like 6'4", you know, a really large, imposing guy. Actually, all of the actual guards who became alpha males in the real experiment were the biggest guys of their guard shift. So it was a much more simpler kind of clean cut that physically. They were the alpha males, but this guy, you know, none of them ended up lending their names to the film. But I feel like it was, at the end of the day, probably out of fairness to them.
Yeah. So how did you go about creating your characters physically? I mean, the looks of the characters, the voice. You got some funky facial hair going on for both of you.
Have you seen
yes.
pictures of Zimbardo?
Yes,
yeah.
Yes.
That's what he looked like, and that's still what he looks
devilish look about him. I mean, with the Lucifer.
And he has actually there is an eccentricity in the way that he speaks too, mm-hmm. That I decided to avoid a little bit, because it calls attention to itself. He's interested in the force of his own personality and his sense of self, and he's actually, you know, he's an incredibly smart and engaging and present person. So it's hard to deny the force of that. But I kind of, he speaks in a very high register up in, and everything is really intense and clear, but also kind of, you know, guided. And I thought that might be distracting. It's enough with the comb over. But
what are you talking about? He has a full head of hair.
He does have a full head of hair. I'm sorry, he just had a side part. But no, it was the crucial part was to like try to not use the cape. You know, try to not use the things that were actually factual. This is part of what he was trying to cultivate, and so it was kind of dimming him down a little bit. Yeah. For me.
And Michael, you're basically playing a character who's playing a character too. I mean,
yeah, I mean,
kind of approach that kind of a role.
I mean, for me, especially when you watch the interviews with Eshelman afterwards, they were the most insightful pieces of information I could have garnered, because he never really felt that bad about the things that he did, and it's very similar to the interview at the end of the movie, where he allowed himself to detach emotionally from his own behavior and from the kind of torment that he was putting these other guys through. He was an aspiring actor, and he was acting, and which is not all that different from what we do. So I related to that, and I thought it was, at the end of the day, just somebody who was having fun, kind of instigating the experiment along. And if you really think about it, if it wasn't for his instigation, and even Doug Corpy, Ezra Miller's character, who, you know, acts as an antagonist to the experiment as well, but for the opposite side, if it wasn't for these two guys really pushing the limits of the guards and the prisoners, the experiment wouldn't have had the same results.
So what was the atmosphere like on the set? First of all, where did you film it, and how long did it take? And was it as claustrophobic to shoot as it is to watch?
Well, we were in Los Angeles, in in an abandoned warehouse of some kind. I think that they have turned into a set for a number of different productions, including TV shows, and it's reliably uncomfortable. There's no air conditioning, and it's dank and unpleasant, so it was perfect. And the experience of shooting it, that's a good question. I mean, it was a very intense experience, and every day I felt like I came on set. By the way, we were shooting in 22 days, and 130-page script in 22 days is...
And a period piece with, 25 lead actors in wigs and stupid mustaches and,
That take time. And Kyle, as you have seen, was incredibly ambitious with his coverage. So cinematically, he had his own interests. And those are not they're not necessarily shared by the acting interests, or mine in particular. That I like to make sure that I understand how we've all collaborated on the scene, what's the event that we're trying to create, and then go about patiently trying to artfully manifest that. That's not this. This is like, oh, we got about 5 seconds to shoot this scene. Your first take we're gonna use, like that. There was one day we came with call sheets, and there was 25 scenes on the call sheet. They couldn't fit them all on one call sheet, and so at that point you're in a different kind of panic mode as an actor. So I was very serious, and meanwhile there was 20 to 25-year-olds in dresses and wigs who were having a ball.
Yeah.
And I kept thinking if I looked at them really seriously, they could get that I needed them to be quiet. That didn't happen. No.
Yeah. No, it was when Billy showed up on set, we had been working with each other for 16 days. And we had shot essentially all the actual experiment in 16 days. And so we were just on another planet. There was no reeling us in. There were inside jokes for miles. There were dick jokes floating around. It was literally like a locker room.
Yeah.
And it was interesting because I even found myself at times, when a couple of those lineup sequences were the most fun and interesting for me to shoot because, pretty much there were very specific beats in the film that we had to get. Because they were the beats that we were recreating from the actual experiment. But those lineups were the only things that Kyle was like, yeah, it's a lineup. Go ahead. And so when one of those guys wouldn't remember his number, they would have to start the fuck over. And it would make me really mad if they didn't get it. And so those lineups, there were takes, I swear to God, there were 25-minute long takes of lineups of just like start again, nope, start again. You're doing it to yourself. Start again. A lot of that stuff was stuff that was like actor lingo for like just pure blackout. Like I do not remember what was going on because it was like in minute 16 of the take.
Yeah.
But we also off camera and when we weren't working, we're having a really pleasant experience because we're also actors who have been competitive with each other because we're all the same age. We're all, trying to get the same jobs. So
and you all have worked together. Many of you have worked together.
And a lot of each other know each other and have worked together before. So it was a really fun experience. And all the dramatic tension that we created on camera was immediately offset that by, everything that we were saying to each other when we weren't rolling.
And there weren't very many women on the set either, I guess, at least
no,
in the cast,
poor
right?
Olivia.
One.
Yeah.
Did you behave yourselves when she was around, or not necessarily?
No, I witnessed it. No.
Yeah,
no. You wear sunglasses quite a lot in the film. Michael, you wear in almost every scene. Billy, you wear it in one important scene. What is that like? I mean, do you feel cut off as an actor that you can't use your eyes to show the proverbial window to the soul?
I mean, yes, but it also makes you completely unreachable, which is a dream. Nobody is registering what is actually going on in your mind. emotionally or, you know.
For a person in a position of power, sunglasses are a really easy, what's the word, prescription for power. Because it's just the mystery of what could be going on. So as an actor, it's fun to manipulate that. And I mean, he was masterful in that part, doing that with tremendous ease. So I just got to give you kudos to that.
But it was also the genius of Dr. Zimbardo at first to even think of sunglasses in the first place. I mean, I think it was literally, he had watched Cool Hand Luke. Dr. Zimbardo, he says this.
He
was
shows
like,
up for interviews now as we're doing press the last couple of days
glasses.
in the mirrored sunglasses, the mirrored sunglasses that he wore, that you saw me wear in that one scene. So he still appreciates that effect.
Yeah, yeah. I want to I want to talk a bit about your earlier careers as well. This is not the first time that you two have worked together, correct? You were both in Almost Famous.
That's correct.
Right.
Did you
Mom?
did you get to know each other much then, or did you?
No. Actually, we didn't.
No, I remember specifically. So I was in 5 minutes of that movie. Billy is the
first
star
5
of that movie,
right.
and it's one of my favorite movies, and I'm not ashamed to say it, even though I'm in it. But I was in 5 minutes of it. I was like 11 or 12 years old, and like Cameron Crowe's rehearsal process is ridiculous. And even though I'm in the first 5 minutes of the movie, I rehearsed for 3 months. And I also worked for like 2 of the 9 months of shooting. Wasn't it a 9-month shoot?
It was really long.
And I just remember Pat Fugit, who plays William Miller throughout the entire movie, saying, "Hey, we're gonna go hang out with Billy." And I was like, "Billy?" Like I've just heard the name Billy, like some like mythical creature who's like some icon that I'm not aware of.
Yeah, that's right. You should have reference. So go on.
So I remember.
How was it for you?
I remember walking into Billy's Honey Wagon trailer, and
Which the trailers back in those days, bigger than my apartment here. I mean, there was a different time in filmmaking. So I probably didn't see you when you walked in because I was
yeah. No, you were in the other room.
I was in a different
And I just remember him like playing the guitar, like practicing his little licks on this amp, and I was
Learning the
I was like, he's definitely showing off right now, but it's awesome, and he's so cool. That's like the one that's the
All
one
true.
memory I have of mine and Billy's interaction during that.
I don't remember him.
So, Michael, you were clearly a child actor. Billy, you became an actor a little bit later. When did each of you know that you wanted to be an actor? And
I pretty young. I mean, weirdly enough, once I started, I don't think I ever made a conscious decision. It was just the fact that I was always really enjoying myself. And I started when I was 6. So I think around 7, 8, I had a really good inkling of what I enjoyed
Actually, 7
doing.
or 8. I can remember filling out one of those little books that you get as a child, like that's meant to describe you as what's your name, when were you born, what do you like, what don't you like, what do you want to be when you grow up, do you have any pets, that stuff. And I found when I was in graduate school studying acting and sifting through a whole bunch of old, crap, one of the books that I had filled out when I was 8, and I had an uncle, a step-uncle, who claimed that he was trying to act. And he had an appearance in some Western, and we all stayed up to watch his appearance, and there was a big, courtroom scene, and in the middle of the scene, you sort of hear a big crowd of people go, "Oh, that's an awful decision, Judge." And we're on the phone with him, with Uncle John, and you hear him scream, "Did you hear me?" And my grandmother, who was footing the bill for his acting, talked a lot of shit about acting for a while. So in the book, I wrote, "What don't you want to be?" And I wrote actor, which I discovered 2 years into graduate school and $80,000 in debt. So that was horrifying. But interestingly enough, it was 1976, and what I did want to be was Bruce Jenner.
oh well.
Do with that what you will.
It's never too late. Never too late. So since this is for the SAG Foundation, do you remember what jobs got you your SAG cards?
I mean, I did a Sudafed commercial when I was like 6.
Yeah.
That might have done it.
I'm pretty confident that it was a film called Grind with Adrian Shelley and Paul Scholze, but I'm not entirely confident that that was the one.
Yeah. What actors particularly influenced you growing up, or that you've worked with, have had the biggest impact on you in terms of your career?
Well, for me, Meryl Streep has always been an ideal, because the actors that I grew up watching and really identifying with were people like Al Pacino and Robert De Niro that were transformative. And it's really hard to sustain a career getting interesting and distinct roles for a long time. And so to see Meryl Streep do that in so many different genres and on stage, it's an impossibility. It's so hard to do, but it's something that I always felt like you should only aspire to, the stuff that you think is super badass. So those are some of the people that were formative for me. I mean, I think I made a list the other day for some reason. I don't know why. But there must have been 50 people on there. So there were a lot of really important influences to what I was interested in acting.
I
You can say Billy Crudup.
You're
I'm right
on
here.
there. You're on the list. I had a very similar. I had an interesting experience. So I must have been like 11 or 12 or something, and I remember I had to cry in an audition, which I never had to do before, and I didn't think I could do it, and I was really nervous about it, and I was just like, well, I'm not an actor, obviously. This is what actors do, and I can't do it. And my dad sat me down, and he was like, "We're gonna watch this movie, and we're gonna tape you right after we watch this movie." And the movie was The Deer Hunter. Oh. And wait, how old were you? It's like 11 or 12.
I think your dad could do some time for that. I mean,
He could. But I remember him. I remember what he said. He was like, "That's acting," and he was talking about Meryl Streep. He was mentioning Meryl Streep. Funnily enough, I didn't get the role. I did cry, but I got cast as Meryl Streep's son in a movie 6 months later.
That's amazing.
Yeah. And what was the experience like working with her?
I mean, it was amazing. It was everything. She said one of the nicest things that anybody's ever said to me, which was the letter that she wrote me after we finished filming. It was like her wrap present to me, and she was like, "Michael, you're such a great guy, which is why you're such a great actor."
Nice.
Yeah. And I think that kind of encapsulates her as a human being and as an actress, which is she is a very real human being.
Yeah. And really generous, yeah, in addition to being awesome.
Yeah. So what's the best piece of advice you've ever been given as an actor?
When I was in undergraduate, I was taking acting for non-majors, and our teacher, who had clearly had a rough time, said, "Don't do it." When I think back on it, that's pretty good advice. It's hard. It's an incredibly challenging profession, as we all know. The ups and downs. Even when you have been, I don't know anybody who has been more fortunate than I have in the roles that I've gotten, the people that I've had a chance to work with. The opportunities have been extraordinary. And I went to acting school with people who were incredibly talented, and some of whom couldn't get an agent out of graduate school. So I've seen the trajectory of most actors, and I can say even when you have been beyond fortunate, it's still a really difficult thing to handle. The ups and downs, maintaining your sense of creativity and curiosity, having like a ruthlessness about your own instrument, knowing when you're doing the same bullshit over and over again, and how to accommodate a lifestyle, and the end. Michael?
One of my acting icons growing up was Michael J. Fox, just because I was obsessed with Back to the Future and Family Ties. And
Dude, huge
Michael J. Fox. And I other than Meryl Streep, I don't really claim that any one person really kind of inspired me wanting to be an actor. But if there was any one person, it was probably Michael J. Fox. And so I auditioned for I auditioned for a television show that he wrote that never got picked up. And I was supposed to screen test, and I went in for a work session with him the day before the screen test, which was meant to be in front of the entire like Fox studio or whatever, something really intimidating. And he came out to the waiting room and he spoke to me before I even went in, and I thought that was incredibly sweet and generous, which, he already had far exceeded my expectations. And then during the actual work session, he was like the first one to laugh. He laughed the loudest, and he was so generous just listening to me and being there. And he said, when I was done, he was like, "You'll be great tomorrow, no matter what happens. I'll tell you the same exact thing that I told Charlie Sheen when he replaced me on Spin City." So I was like, okay. And he said, I took him to the rafters, and I showed him all the empty seats, and I said, "You know what you have to do? Let them love you." And I was like, I get it. I don't get it, but I get it. I get the appeal. Let them love you. I don't know what that means. I think it just means let it all in. Let people
open yourself up.
Yeah.
That's
that was good advice.
God, he's awesome.
All right. Well,
So awful.
I think.
Had so many great qualities.
Unfortunately, I think we're out of time. But thank you for letting us love you, even when you're playing these horrible characters.
Thank you.
Billy Crudup and Michael Angarano.